So here's the deal. I'm not sure how well this is going to work out, but I plan on starting a series where I talk about prepping. What you need to do to get yourself to the point where you feel that you are prepared for a specific scenario, man made or natural disasters. In this series, I will go over each category from a very high level perspective. Look, full disclaimer, I am not the most knowledgeable, I am not the most experienced. I am only going to tell you some of the things that I've been thinking about lately that may help you with your prepping experience. I am not doing this to say I am here to school those who have been prepping for way longer than I have, or people who have been thinking about this for way longer than I have. Because I can tell you, I have not been thinking about this for a long time and I regret it, so I'm trying to do it now. So I'm processing my thoughts out in video in hopes that it helps some people with their prepping. And if I am wrong about things, I expect people who are experienced in prepping to comment respectfully down below and explain the reasons why I'm wrong and explain what I'm missing and add more context, because that will help me and it will help others who are watching this video, because the people who are watching this video are obviously also trying to get to the point where they are being prepared for these types of scenarios. So that's my entire intent here, is to not spew knowledge and act like I'm an expert, but I'm only giving you what I've been thinking about and categorizing things in a certain way that could then lead to a more positive outcome when something terrible occurs, like a massive snowstorm, hurricane, power outage, or worse disaster scenarios like conflict of some sort, whether it's a civil war or an all-out war. And this is not just for people who live in this area or live in America, or it's just anybody across the world needs to think about these things. So without further ado, let's jump into the categories that I've laid out in a high-level fashion. I'll go through them really quick because this is the first video of multiple videos, and I will make a separate video for each category and sub-videos for each of those categories. So if there's something that someone talks about or comments down below in one of my videos, I will circle back to that, do more research, and do another video on that. So please, I beg you to comment below. I beg you to give me some information here. And if you would like to get into more detail about these things, let me know what I should look for, and I will do my research, and I will post a video about it. And again, this is just me saying this is what I've been thinking about. And if you think I'm wrong or if you think I'm missing something, please comment below. Let me know. Okay, so I've been thinking about categorizing the different things that are needed for a survival situation. Number one is obviously water. Water could be used for many things. Drinking is number one priority. If you need it for pets, if you have pets, if you need it for livestock, if you have livestock, you need it for your plants, your crops, you need it for cleaning, whether it's your dishes, whether it's your homestead, whether it's your hands or body, or you also need it for your clothes. And so there are plenty of reasons why you need water. So also, you need it for cooking, especially if you have like MREs and those freeze-dried meals that you would need water to boil and pour into to rehydrate the food. So those are a few things that you need water for. So that's category one, okay? Category two is food. You need food. You've got to have food, just like you got to have water. Not just for you and your family, but for your pets or your livestock again. Talk about, at some point, how to store your food, where to store your food, the types of foods that you need for long-term storage, and what you should prioritize over others. What should you get first? Those are the types of things that I'll talk about when I talk about food. Again, you can get your food from plants you grow in your backyard. You can get your food from your livestock that you have. And again, long-term meals ready to eat, freeze-dried, keeping them in long-term storage for when you need them the most. That's food. The next, I would say, is sort of tied with a couple different things, but I'm going to use shelter and clothing combined. I hope you don't mind, but shelter, just getting a roof over your head, getting yourself out of the elements. Exposure to the elements is a huge cause of death, injury, and sickness in times of peril, especially when you look at when there's a really bad winter storm and power goes out for a substantial period of time. You may be stuck in your vehicle for a long period of time. What do you have to keep yourself warm? What do you have to keep yourself dry? Keeping yourself dry and keeping yourself warm, two very important things regardless of where you're at, whether it's hot weather or cold weather. Shelter. Clothing, I consider clothing shelter. You are sheltering your body from the elements. Have plenty of socks, have plenty of jackets, have plenty of shoes for different types of activity, long distance walking shoes, working shoes, and just overall keeping your feet warm shoes. And shirts, long sleeve, short sleeve, jackets, something to keep you sheltered from the wind and the rain, the snow. So that, in my perspective, is shelter. Also, hats. Keeping a hat on, I would say hats that have a brim that run all the way around. I don't care if you look silly, but protecting yourself from the sun. If you're out in the backyard for long periods of time, doing gardening during the day, you have to think about exposure to the sun and avoid those bad burns, because the more you burn, and you may not have the resources to sort of subside the burn, you could get sun poisoning. You could get some sort of sickness, and you do not want to develop any sort of cancer from overexposure to the sun. So that's another form of shelter. Hats, super important. Now, what I consider right under that is first aid and heating. And again, I'm sort of pairing them together as I'm cheating, but whatever. First aid, having bandages, having band-aids, having antiseptic wipes, cleaning solutions, things of that sort to clean out wounds, bug bite kits, tick bite kits. Just making sure that you have these things for when, not if, but when that situation arises, when you need those first aid items in order to bring down the pain level, decrease the possibility for infection and exposure, closing up wounds, having tourniquets available, stitching kits available, because truthfully, you really never know when you're going to need it. You can avoid injury all you want, but eventually you're going to get hurt. So have those resources available to assist you with dealing with an injury when it happens. First aid, very important. Next, either right below it or right above it, is heating. More people obviously die from the cold than they do the heat. So making sure you have appropriate heating. And not, again, this is not just heating to keep yourself warm, but this is heating for cooking. You need to have heat to cook foods. And if you do not have heat to cook foods, you're in big trouble. You need fire of some sort, whether it's getting a wood-burning stove or a wood oven so that you can cook on that wood oven. And you can use wood instead of having to rely on public utilities like gas or propane or oil or things of that sort. Now, if you have reserves set aside, propane reserves, oil reserves, then good, you're in good shape. But a lot of people I know do not have those things in reserve and could be in trouble. So making sure you have the appropriate amount of resources to keep your home warm during the wintertime, and also allowing you to have the necessary fuel to cook. Next, I think right below that would be hardware. And hardware, I'm going to group two things in there. That is tools, and that is firearms. It is very important to have tools to use for farming. It is important to have tools to use for processing firewood that you will need when you need to burn firewood to, again, either cook or keep your homestead warm or provide light. And you need tools to repair things on your homestead. If something breaks, do you have the tools to fix it so you can avoid more issues down the line? What tools do you have available to you to allow you to accomplish your daily tasks? And also, if there's an issue, do you have tools to fix that problem when it does occur? Nails, screws, screwdrivers, hammers, wrenches, all of those types of things. Make sure that you have just a good stockpile of them, because you probably will need them at some point. Now, let's get to the touchy subject. Firearms. Not a lot of people like having guns around the home, and I can understand why. They are scary to some people. They make a loud banging noise, and they fire a projectile thousands of feet per second across a space, and can cause death. So, yes, there are plenty of tools that can kill you, but guns have been tainted so much in society over the past more than 150 years, I think, at this point, that people are more afraid of them than they should be, but you should always have a healthy fear and respect of firearms. But I would suggest that you own a firearm, because there are going to be people that we've seen already. Just as an example, with Hurricane Katrina that happened in New Orleans, there are people who looted. You see it happening whenever the power grid goes down. There are desperate people who will do desperate things in desperate times. So make sure that you have the appropriate hardware, firearms, to protect yourself, you and your family. Because it's great if you have water, and you have food, and you have shelter, and you have heating, and you have clothes, and you have hardware, tools. But all of that could be taken away if someone is more prepared from an aggressor perspective than you are from a defender perspective. Do you have the tools necessary to defend yourself for when that comes? Now, this doesn't have to be you. You don't have to be the one holding the firearm. You don't want to have to be the one pulling the trigger. So maybe you have someone else who is a part of your group, who's a part of your family, who will assume that responsibility. Again, survival is not an individual thing. You cannot think that prepping is just you versus everyone else, because I can guarantee you, you will never survive. And we'll get to that in just a moment. But firearms, be prepared for defense and only defense. What's next? Library. I highly suggest buying books about these different things that you'll need for survival. It's things like how to store water, how to filter water, how to prepare food properly when you don't have a gas or electric stove available to you. How do you grow certain vegetables and crops? How do you raise livestock properly? What vegetables should I grow if I need to survive and not starve? Which ones have the most nutrients? There are a lot of questions that you could ask, that I still ask myself, that I'm trying to find the answer to. But if you do not know the answer to those questions, go out to your local bookstore or go online while we still have the internet and purchase those books and just have them in your library for whenever you need them. So if you're working, let's just say, with a certain vegetable and you don't necessarily understand when to plant the seeds for it, you don't know how many times you need to water it, it doesn't need as much water as other vegetables. Well, you need to know these things. What is the pH level of the soil? Those, again, make sure that you have that knowledge accessible somewhere. It doesn't all have to be up here 100% of the time, because I guarantee you it won't. But have it available to you for when you need it. Have your own library that you can access at any time. Have books about home building, building shelters, building fires, building tools, tying knots, things of that sort. Buy books about navigation, understanding how to read a compass, how to read a map, topographical maps, how to understand how to tell what the weather is going to be. Get books on learning about the weather and observing your environment and the behavior of animals. How to learn how to locate water through reading a book. Again, you don't need to know all these things right now, but purchase books that will be able to tell you how to do these things. Because when you need to learn, you have the resources there. So it's building that knowledge base that will be available to you, when you need it. So that's your library. Maps. Purchase maps of your immediate vicinity and surrounding larger vicinities. Buy road maps of your country or of your state or wherever you are. Buy a road map so you can see the road map if you need to travel on a road, or buy a topographical map so you know where you can and cannot walk, or maybe looking at where the water is in your area. Find water table maps. Use these resources that are available to you through public forums that you can download and print out and store away. Laminate them, put them in some sort of plastic lining in a little 3-ring binder, and put them with your other survival things. And start your own survival library. And that way you know where those books are. If you need to access your farming books, if you need to access your tracking books, if you need to access your weather books, find those books that exist and organize them properly so that if you need them, you have them. Now, what about the next thing? Um, I would say at this point is when you need to start looking into electricity. And I'm not saying electricity is further down the list, but I'm saying that this is where it comes into play. So I'll talk about electricity first, and maybe I'll reorganize this tier list. But again, I don't see electricity as above or below the last few items that we talked about, hardware and library. Maybe it comes right after heating, who knows? And maybe you need electricity for heating. But generators, inverters, you need some sort of way to generate power, whether it is through, if you have propane, if you have oil or gas or what have you. If you have those resources, great. But if you do not, how are you going to generate energy? Are you going to use hydropower? Are you going to use wind power? Are you going to use solar power? How prepared are you, and what are the resources that you have available to you in your environment that you can utilize to generate energy? Now, probably the easiest thing is if the grid goes down or if there's a power outage, you use a generator. Get a gas generator, get a solar power generator, some sort of way to, like an inverter of some sort, to use to generate power that you may need to power a tool, to power the refrigerator, to power a freezer, some sort. Lights, electronic devices, which is what I'll get into next, have that generator available because you're going to need it the second something goes down. And if you don't have it, then you're in trouble. And a lot of these other things are going to be very difficult to maintain if you do not have that generator. The next thing I would say is communication. What do you have in order to communicate to those around you? The first thing I would say is figuring out what's going on there outside. What's happening? Where is it happening? And how long is it going to last? Emergency radios. Again, storms. You may not be able to watch your TV. TV towers may be down. Can you access a radio signal? If so, have an emergency radio available so you can access those transmissions and listen to what the weather says, or listen to when they say the power is going to be back up. All of these things are accessible through an emergency transponder or radio that you can use to listen to those frequencies and listen to those broadcasts so that you know how long these things are going to last, what you need to do to prepare, and how many resources you need in order to survive, so you can set those aside. So communications. Also ham radio. If you're proficient in ham radio, great. I'm studying for ham radio right now. I want to get my technician license so that I can get my own ham radio and have it for when I need to communicate in case of emergency. Also walkie-talkies. If you have family and friends who are close by, you can access maybe and communicate with them through the walkie-talkies. Some way to communicate outside of your cell phone, whether it's a landline if they still work. Having that access to communication to others to coordinate your survival efforts. Because again, survival is not an individual effort. It is a group effort. You need a team, you need a group, you need a community, you need a tribe in order to survive. Lastly, in terms of electricity, lights. Having lights available because you need it at night. If you're doing something outside at night, or if you're doing something inside at night like studying or sharpening your tools, you need a way to light a room or a space outside or inside to perform these types of activities. If you need to read and the only time you have to read is after the sun goes down and you don't have light, you're not reading. If you need to sharpen your tools, as I said, if you need to do some work somewhere in your house to prepare for the next day, but you couldn't do it until after the sun went down, you need lighting. Figure out ways to get lighting, whether it's oil lamps, some type of lamp or light system or torch system. Develop ways to have that lighting available. Again, it could be powered through gas, could be powered through propane, could be powered through electricity by using a generator. It could be powered by some type of oil, some lamp oil. Find ways to get that lighting so that you can utilize the time after the sun goes down for other productive things like preparing for the next day and what's to come. Lastly, I would say you can do this right now. And if you haven't already been doing this, I would suggest you start. And that is exercise. And all I mean by exercise is walk long distance. Do long distance walks. Start short, maybe a quarter mile, half mile, mile, whatever you consider to be short, and start walking longer and longer distances. Start putting heavier packs on your back because you may need to walk long distances with a heavy pack. If you need to get the heck out of Dodge, you need to have a pack with your gear to get you out of there. So train your body, train your mind. If you do not have a sharp mind and you do not have a sharp and strong body, you have very little chance of surviving if something goes wrong. I hate to say it, and I'm going to be straight up with you. If you are not in decent shape, where you are not mobile, you're not able to move around, you're not able to think on your feet, you don't have as much of a chance as other people do. So build yourself up to give you that chance to survive. I'm asking this of all of you. Do these things, exercise, whether it's walking or jogging or biking. Transportation is another thing on my list. Transportation, your own feet, a bike, a car, if they work, a horse, something that you can use to get from one point to another. Find ways for transportation. And transporting goods, how are you going to get goods from one place to another? If you're trading with someone who's 5 miles down the road, how are you going to transport that thing from their location back to yours? These are things to think about. So that was my last thing, was transportation, but I wanted to lead up to that by saying exercise, because if your feet don't work, how are you going to get from point A to point B? You can't. And if your mind is not sharp, how can you think of everything that you need in a situation? Because the second something happens, you need to make a split-second decision, and it better be the right one, and it better be one that you've thought about before, so that it's not something that you have to ponder for a long period of time. Again, another thing to do to exercise is lifting things, building up strength. You don't need weights. Doing push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, squats, lunges, those types of things. Just body weight exercises, high-intensity interval training. Get your heart trained, get your lungs trained for these things, because if it happens, you are prepared. And you don't need to go crazy. You don't need to think about these things all the time. But these are good things to think about, maybe a couple times a week, or even once a week if you're not that concerned about something going wrong in the near future. But just doing things to get you to say, I'm at peace now, because if the power goes out, I'm ready. If there's a winter storm, I've got the supplies to survive. Even if it's for just a 72-hour period for you and your family, you can feel at peace knowing that you've done what you need to do in order to survive a situation like that. Wrapping up the video, again, these are just some thoughts that I've been having over the past couple of weeks and months regarding setting yourself up for survival and sustainability. And there will be more videos about this, but this is my introduction video. So it's just going through these categories in more detail now in multiple videos. So we'll be doing water, we'll be doing food, we'll be doing shelter, we'll be doing first aid, clothing, heating, hardware, tools and firearms. We'll be doing your library. We'll be doing communications, lighting, transportation, electric power, generators, wind, solar, hydro, all of these things. As I do research myself, I plan on sharing the knowledge with you. And that's my goal, is while we still have the ability to communicate over mediums, electronic mediums like YouTube and Rumble, I just want to provide this information. And again, this is not me saying that I know everything, because I don't. This is not me saying I have more experience than I actually do, because I don't. I am just here to provide the information to you based off of what I've been thinking about and based off of what I have learned and will be learning in the near future. So anyway, long story short, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and these are things that you can now expand on. Write those categories down: water, food, shelter, first aid, clothing, heating, hardware, library, electricity, generators, communications, lighting, transportation. Get these things written down. Oh, and exercise, conditioning your body and your mind. And then we'll expand on them more again. Think about these things. Take the time. One thing each week. Think about water one week. Think about food next week. Get your mind trained to think about these things and not be overwhelmed. Of course, it's a lot. There's a lot of information out there, but don't get crippled by the amount of information that exists out there. Take it one step at a time. Start very simple. Every time you go out food shopping, buy a couple cases of water, or just one case of bottled water. Every time you go out food shopping, buy a bag of rice, buy some beans, and just have that just in case you need it. Because those little tiny improvements can go a long way in a survival situation and in a preparedness situation. So you don't have to be those guys with the bus-sized dome locker / shelter under their ground that no one knows about, that they built themselves with air conditioning and heating and whatever. You don't have to get to that point unless you want to. Get to a point where you know you can sustain yourself and your family in a situation that arises, whether it's man-made or natural disaster. So, thank you, everybody. Again, please comment below if you have some other ideas on survival techniques, things that I missed in terms of categories, and I will go into more detail over the next couple of weeks. So, stay safe, everybody. Stay healthy, and I hope you all are well, and I wish all of you the best. Let's get prepared together.